PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. And joining me for this episode is Rey Hernandez. Rey, how you doing, sir?
Excellent. How about you?
I'm doing well, Rey. I'm in Florida, so it's rainy now. It'll be sunny tomorrow again, and then it'll be miserably hot and then really cold again. It's really the strange state we live in.
I lived in Miami for 18 years, so I certainly know about it.
Yeah, the bipolar weather here. So, Rey, I was telling you in a before podcast with you, it was like going back to college. I had to sit down and just learn a bunch of stuff. It was very enlightening.
Well, it's academic research, and that's something that usually not associated with either the paranormal or ufology.
Right. And so before we, here's how I'd like to do it. I'll ask this, because I did notice, and I did read and hear it in the interviews, you started this adventure as an atheist, which I hear a lot of that, especially from academics and scientists. I hear it a lot. So that being said, what put you on the path in ufology and paranormal and the parallels in between?
Well, my background is as an academic. I went to Berkeley for a PhD. I went to Cornell for a master's. And then I was a university professor for 7 years. And then I eventually became an attorney. And so I was never exposed to any of these topics. I never had any interest nor desire. And I would have thought that everyone that was interested in these topics was a kook. And then in 2012, I had an experience in my living room where our 15-year-old Jack Russell Terrier became very ill, and she was, I guess the term that is used is paralyzed, completely paralyzed. And so we called our vet and made plans to euthanize her the next day in the afternoon. And my wife began to pray all night. And that morning, this energy being appeared to my wife and I, made her disappear, the dog disappear right in front of me. It put me to sleep. And then an hour later, when I woke up, our dog was running around the living room, completely healed. And then after that experience, my wife began to pray at night outside. And 15 minutes later, there were these huge UFOs that appeared. And that's when I realized that this was UFO related, not paranormal related. And then 6 months after that initial experience, that was in March of 2012, I tried to call down my first UFO. And within 15 minutes, it appeared. And then it started 4 years of nonstop paranormal experiences for me.
Huh. Yeah, I can see how that would have a very profound effect on you.
Yes, most definitely.
It's because there's another person, a scientist I'd spoken to. I do a lot of off podcast interviews, and the majority of the scientists I speak with, they don't elect to come on the show. They don't want any kind of public image. So the one gentleman, it turns out his grandson really believed in ufology, and he wanted to disprove this. So he ends up going to the field to do a little research, and whatever happened, it completely turned him around. Like, he went from a very scientific perspective to almost spiritual in nature by what he witnessed, and so much so it compelled him to do a very long-term study on this, which when he is done with the study, and I hope when he listens, I want him on the show, because I'm dying to hear his research. But for you, the same thing. So you come from your credentials speak professionalism across the board. And you come from an atheist background and you have this experience. And so that effect on you then entails you to get into the world and do more research, right?
Well, what had happened is I did what is called an academic literature review on the UFO contact phenomenon. And what I discovered was that there was almost nothing that was published academically on that. And so within a few months of me having these experiences, I was put in contact with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon, the founder of the Institute for Noetic Sciences, very well-known individual. I'm sure you know his background.
Yeah.
And Dr. Rudy Schild, who is an Emeritus Professor of Astrophysics at Harvard University, and also Mary Rodwell, which is a non-academic researcher of the UFO contact phenomenon. And then the four of us founded this organization, which later came to be known as the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation. And then we agreed to do a comprehensive academic research study on the UFO contact phenomenon. And it would be a statistical research study, both quantitative and qualitative surveys. And so over the next 2 months, we brought in various academics. Most of them were retired PhD academics and researchers, people like Kathleen Martin. I'm sure you know who she is.
Yeah, I've had her on the show.
Yep, people like Leo Sprinkle, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who's now deceased. He was the first academic to ever write an article on the abduction phenomenon. And then we had people like Barbara Lamb. We had people like Rosemary Allen Guiley, who is researching the paranormal for over 30 years and has wrote over 60 books. She's also deceased. We brought in a PhD statistician, Dr. Russell Scalpone, a PhD neuroscientist, Dr. Bob Davis, a PhD psychologist who had been teaching classes on academic research to PhD students, and also published several books on the paranormal. His name is Dr. John Climo, and numerous other individuals of this type of caliber. And so for the next 5 years, we undertook the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Experiential Research Study, which was comprised of 3 surveys. 2 of them were quantitative, comprised of 660 questions. And then the qualitative research instrument was 70 open-ended questions. And we wound up with responses from more than 4,350 individuals that have both seen a UFO and have had some type of contact with a non-human intelligence. And those 4,350 individuals came from over 125 different countries. And that was just for our English language survey. We also conducted the survey in 4 other languages. The second highest number of respondents was to our Spanish language survey. For the Spanish survey, we had 1,200 individuals that took our surveys. And after we published it for about three and a half years. And after those 3.5 years, we began, the academics began to crunch out the numbers. And what we found out with the analysis of the data was that our research findings pretty much contradict what's circulating in ufology. And I could go over these topic areas so you and your audience members can understand what the data revealed. But this information, this data, the researchers, the UFO contact researchers in our group, people like, as I said before, Mary Rodwell, Kathleen Martin, Rosemary Allen Guiley, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, Barbara Lamb, and like 3 or 4 other abduction researchers. They knew what we were going to get because they had been working with thousands of experiencers for over 30 years, the vast majority of them. They just weren't able to quantify it because they didn't have the statistical data. But now that we had the data, then they said, yep, you know, the data that you guys got is exactly what I would have expected. And so, and then we wound up publishing our data in an 820-page book. It weighs 3.5 pounds. Oh. And the title of our book is Beyond UFOs, the Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. And that was co-edited by myself, Dr. Rudy Schild, the professor from Harvard, and Dr. John Climo, the professor at Brown University and author of many paranormal articles. And so, and again, I'm giving more than half of our book for free. People just need to send me an email. And I'll send you chapter 1, chapter 2, which are the two main chapters that analyze the data. And that's over 300 pages, okay?
Wow.
And then I'll send you a couple of other chapters from our book and an academic research article that was published by three PhD academics and myself, and we published it in the Journal of Scientific Exploration, which is a peer-reviewed academic research journal where Dr. Jacques Vallet and Dr. Dean Radin and many well-known academics in the field of parapsychology have published their academic research. So, and my email, just send me an email. My email is info, I-N-F-O, at agreaterreality.com. Info at agreaterreality.com.
And I'll put that in description too, so people can find it.
Thank you. And if you'd like, I go on with some of the research findings.
You can. Look, I'm happy to have you on.
Okay, all right, fantastic.
You absolutely, I got to tell you, and watching and reading some of your material, it's done this thing to me where I lose sleep at night because I do this. I go down rabbit holes. I read and learn as much as possible. And then I find myself in this position with your information where something I was stumbling on already, that I've already seen a lot of parallels in the paranormal, ufology, and the near-death. A lot of it having to do with perception. I've spoken to Steve Murr a number of times about vibrations at different frequencies. And then I'm learning you, because again, I'm new to this. I'm new to ufology, right? I've always been fascinated by it, but I've never actually researched it. So this is new.
Our organization, the reason why we did this study was because with our new organization titled CCRI, the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, what it was the previous PhD academics that were involved in the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation, and we added about 15 more additional academics. And most of these individuals, I would say the vast majority of these academics, their interest is on consciousness. What is the nature of our reality? And they also have an interest in the paranormal, which we call the contact modalities. Okay. And so we believe that there is a relationship between consciousness and the contact modalities, that all of the paranormal need to be studied as one phenomenon instead of separate and distinct phenomena.
Yeah.
But we couldn't begin to compare the UFO contact with, let's say, for example, near-death experiences or with hallucinogenic journeys. People that take ayahuasca or DMT or psilocybin, magic mushrooms, whatever, and the NDE phenomenon, because in the field of ufology, there was zero academic research. We knew absolutely nothing about UFO contact. All we had were the bullshit studies of David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins.
Right.
These were individuals that publicly stated they've never met one individual with a positive experience. Okay, not one. Okay, so and these people were conducted hypnotic regression of people that they pre-selected that already were fear-based. Okay. And then just fed them, leading questions. And they set the whole tone of what UFO contact was all about, for the next 35 years, okay, until now. But it was all bullshit because we found the complete opposite of what these people were talking about. And again, we're not just talking 200 people that they pre-selected over a 30-year period, okay?
Right.
We're talking about 4,300 people, which were not pre-selected. And so there was no data. There was no academic research on this phenomenon, okay? So in order to be able to compare the UFO contact phenomenon with near-death experiences, with out-of-body experiencers, with hallucinogenic journeys, with remote viewers, et cetera, you need to find out what is going on with UFO contact, okay?
Right.
So that's why we did that first study, not because we were a ufology organization, no. Okay, we were not a ufology organization. We were never into ufology. That's why we called our first book Beyond UFOs. Okay,
right.
The science of consciousness and contact with non-human intelligence, because this has nothing to do with nuts and bolts ufology. That's what our research findings reveals. Okay, so let me go into some of these research findings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a broad overview, and then I'll focus on each category. Okay.
Okay.
Number one, what we wanted to find out was whether these experiences were positive, negative, or neutral. Okay. And what we discovered was that these experiences were overwhelmingly positive experiences. Now, that's not what you read on the internet, okay? And David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins is the complete opposite. Number two, these experiences promoted a positive transformation of the contact experiencer. What you had is, just like near-death experiencers, these people totally changed for the positive. And I'll go into the details later on. Number three, these experiences were primarily paranormal in nature and not physical experiences. Okay. Number four, these experiences involved a manipulation of space-time. In other words, that these experiences might be interdimensional in nature, not necessarily physical in nature. In terms of the positive, negative, or neutral, type of questions, what we discovered was that 1/3 of these individuals had an abduction. 2/3 did not have an abduction, but yet the whole field of ufology sees contact as primarily abduction related. Well, if you take that viewpoint, they missed out on 2/3 of the people. Okay, even then, the people that had an abduction, 92% of these people that had an abduction now call themselves contactees and not abductees.
Huh.
Okay, I'll go into those details, a little later on.
Yeah.
But initially, 37% of these people viewed as their experiences as negative. Okay, 37% initially viewed it as negative, but over time, the overwhelming majority of these individuals continued to have contact experiences with non-human intelligence. And then, for example, 40% of these individuals had more than 20 experiences. Okay?
Right.
40%. And then between 10 to 20 was another, like 30%. So you had like 70% of the people had 10 or more contact experiences. And we also found out that the more experiences you had, the more positive was your response, your answer.
Right.
Okay. Eventually, only 4% of these individuals viewed their experiences as negative. That's it, 4%.
Ray, to add to that, so some of the people I've spoken to that are contactees or abductees or whatever it may be, experiencers overall.
Yeah.
I find the ones that tell me that their experience was negative were alpha type people that were in control. Like some of these would be like military people or even people that are high up in people that have control that don't like to relinquish control or seem to be the ones with the more negative experience. Other people that they say initially it was a negative, but when they come to realize what was going on, it became just Tuesday to them. And they had no pushback, no reason to report. I wonder how many go unreported because some of these people are like, well, it's Thursday and they're here to visit and that's that. But
yeah.
do you find that though? A lot of people in power positions of life, they're the ones with the most negative pushback?
Well, we didn't ask that question. Huh. And in our interviews, we didn't ask those questions. And in the open-ended questions, we didn't ask that.
Right.
The only thing I could say is what our data reveals. Okay.
I see.
But the data reveals that when they were taking their survey, many, many years after their experiences started, it was just 4% viewed it as negative. Okay. Not that initially they didn't have negative experiences. No, 37% initially viewed it as negative. Okay. And I'll go into those details later on.
Okay.
Finding number 6 was that 50% of these individuals were brought to another multidimensional reality. Okay. These experiences were overwhelmingly positive of these 50% of the people. I had that experience. I was brought to another reality where I was taught spiritual lessons. Okay. That was overwhelming the type of teachings that took place. Spiritual lessons about cosmology, the nature of our reality, and spirituality and the afterlife. Okay. And these realities were very similar to NDEs, but people stated that time stopped, that time doesn't exist. Okay. Also, these individuals were shown visions of humanity's past and humanity's future, namely that we're heading towards a path of self-annihilation if we don't change as a species. Okay, and that was finding number 6, that 50% of these people were brought to a matrix reality. Finding number 7 is that 50% of these individuals reported a UFO-related medical healing. Okay, and as I said before, if you send me an email, I will send you chapter 6 of our book, which was 10 case studies of individuals that gave us their documented medical records of their medical healings. Chapter 6 was written by a retired emergency room physician, Dr. Joseph Burks, and as well as Preston Dennett, who you might know who he is. He's written over 25 books dealing with ufology. And so this was 50% of the people. You know, just like our dog, I told you, was totally paralyzed.
Right.
And this energy being appeared and then put me to sleep. My wife disappeared in front of me. The dog disappeared in front of me. When I woke up, the dog was running around the entire living room fully healed. Okay. Well, I'm not the only one that happened to. 50% of the people. One of the individuals is now public with her medical healing. Kathleen Martin. Yeah. Have you interviewed her before?
Yeah, I've had her on a couple times. She's she's given me some real in-depth information.
Okay, well, that's very in-depth. She's listed on chapter 6, but when we wrote the book, she wanted to be anonymous because she felt that it would take away from her credibility.
Right.
Okay. But yet she had chronic fatigue syndrome. Okay. Also, she publicly came out, she just published a new book titled From Abductions to Spirituality. Okay. Yeah. Just like Whitley Strieber. Whitley Strieber set the agenda with David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins, all about abductions, how negative it is. And now he's Mr. Love and Light. Okay. His last 3 or 4 books have all been about spirituality. Okay.
Right.
And about the afterworld and about God. And in his recent interview, I heard him say he prays at night to God, and he gives thanks to God and to his visitors, quote unquote, because they gave him spirituality and they gave him the ability to communicate with his deceased wife. Okay. So these 2 individuals, Whitley Strieber and Kathleen Martin, are just an example of individuals that initially viewed the experience as negative, but now they view it as highly positive, highly transformative. Okay. That's what our data reveals, not the bullshit of David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Well, you know, Ray, a lot of that is too. So these guys that put that information out there, I think some of them have an agenda. I'm not saying all of them, but the majority seems to have an agenda. Like, because if you're telling human beings that there's other beings out there and they're you know, not only not evil, but they might be spiritual and they could help you. There's a lot of pushback from organized religion, government's not. This is all control factors, right? You're taking control from large groups of people that are very used to having control. So I think a lot of that information put out there is just to kind of keep the information that you're bringing at bay a little bit. Make sense?
Well, I understand that perspective, but I think these 2 individuals that I mentioned, Jacobs and Hopkins,
right.
I think they initially entered it from a deeply biased perspective, fixed bias perspective. But yet I've met numerous individuals that when they went to Bud Hopkins, okay, he would tell them, look, and found out that their experiences were not negative. They were either neutral or positive. He would respond by saying, look, I'm very, very busy. Maybe you need to see Leo Sprinkle. Maybe you need to go to see Barbara Lamb, you know,
right.
Because they had a totally different perspective of the phenomenon. So you had these individuals that were pre-selective of who they wanted to work with.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. I mean, Bud Hopkins' ex-wife, okay,
right.
They were married for 10 years. She wrote an article several years ago where she described all the BS that went on with Bud Hopkins' regressions. She videotaped many of his regressions, and she wrote a whole, article, I forgot how many pages it was, but like almost 20 pages about what went on with this man, and where he was pre-selecting people, And so it's not Rey Hernandez that's saying this. This is his ex-wife right. that videotaped many of these sessions. And then also on David Jacobs' interviews, like 3 different interviews, he stated recorded, that's on YouTube, that he's never met not one person that had a positive experience. Okay? Huh. So that tells you everything, the agenda of these people.
Yeah, okay? I mean, I'm not even a public figure like these guys, and I met plenty of people who had positive ones.
Yeah. So that just tells you, that it's all, misinformation and disinformation, as you said before.
Yeah, I mean, one of the few people that were, again, that's why I brought that point up earlier. The few people that I'd spoken to on my I do a lot of interviews, again, off podcast. The only two negatives I had, one was a sergeant in the police, and another one was a veteran of the military. And both of these are very alpha men who don't want to be controlled, or they're so to give away their control in a scenario that's beyond their power. I could see that being negative, but that was the only two I came across so far.
Well, we had a hell of a lot of people that viewed their experiences as negative. But what happened is the vast majority of these people only had one or two experiences. That's it. Okay? The overwhelming majority continued to have experiences. And then later on, the nature of their experiences changed, and their viewpoint of their experiences changed. For example, they said, okay, I was paralyzed. I had these three little beings doing a medical inspection on me, but I was scared shitless, excuse the French, okay,
yeah, no
when this was taking place. But then later on, they began to explain to me what they were doing, okay, which was they were checking me physically to see if I had any issues, medical issues with me. And then later on, they began to be very friendly with me. Many of them communicated with me. They said, we apologize if we hurt you. That wasn't our intention. And then all of a sudden, these other types of beings, normally human-looking beings or energy beings, appeared to them and began to bring them to other realities and to give them spiritual teachings. Okay? So the perception of their early experiences changed, and the actual experiences that they continued to have were very different. In many of the cases, they would start with these small grays, but then later on, it's other beings, mainly the energy beings and the human-looking beings that they begin to interact with. And that's when, the spirituality was introduced to them. But let me just finish the last point here. One was that number 8, that was 85% of these individuals understood that there was a relationship between UFO contact, the paranormal, and the spirit world. Okay, major finding right there.
Right.
Relationship between UFO contact, the paranormal, and the afterlife. Now let's focus on finding number 1. We wanted to find out whether these experiences were positive, negative, or neutral. And we asked over 40 different questions to address that topic. Why? Because depending how you phrase a question, you'll get a different response. Okay?
Right.
So we asked a straightforward question. Okay? Many people attacked what we were doing and say, oh, we asked leading questions. We asked biased questions, And so let me ask you whether this question is a leading question or whether it was a biased question. Okay? So let me ask you the question. How would you describe your experiences? Were they positive, negative, or neutral? Yes. Was that a leading question?
No, there's nothing leading about that. It's multiple choice.
It's multiple choice. Right. It's A, B, or C, okay? And it was fixed choice that you had to answer one of those questions if you want to continue with our survey. Well, lo and behold, what did we find out? 66% said their experiences were positive. 29% viewed their experiences as neutral. 5% viewed their experiences as negative. Huh. Okay? So again, these people that attacked what we were doing, for example, there was a very, very famous ufologist, probably the number one noted ufologist that's invited to all the ufology conferences, has been on all these TV shows, and Ancient Aliens and all that garbage that's put on TV.
Right.
He on every show, okay? This guy's not even a scientist, doesn't even have a PhD, doesn't even have a master's degree, okay? And yet he said that what we were doing was woo-woo science, whatever the hell that means. But yet we had the scientists, okay? We had the physicists, we had the neuroscientists, we had the people that were conducting research in parapsychology, We had one other man is a PhD in information sciences, which is data, statistics, and computers.
Well,
okay?
you know what's happening, Ray, is that somebody's like that guy probably. Like when you're on a lot of these shows, you start out genuine, right? And then you start getting attention. And once you start getting that attention, you're like, you gotta make something more of it. And that's why I hate watching those shows that are in a room.
It's unbelievable. Right. This guy is very, very well known. His name is Richard Dolan.
Oh,
okay.
I've heard of Richard Dolan.
He also said that David Jacobs is the best researcher in terms of UFO contact experiences. David Jacobs, who said that he's never met one person that's had a positive experiences, he says he's the best. He's number one. Okay. And also a year ago, he came out with a book titled The Alien Agenda, as if he's researched the alien agenda. Okay. He's never done any research at all about the alien agenda. Okay. We're the ones that did the formal academic research on the alien agenda. So that's just an example of all these con artists that are circulating in the field of ufology and the BS that they've been circulating. Yeah. Okay.
Well, there's a lot of money in it too, right? There's
this person makes a living out of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's some unsung heroes out there that in ufology, like Cheryl Costa and her data. It's an amazing amount of data. In fact, that's who brought me to you, Cheryl Costa.
Yes, and Cheryl does not make a living out of this.
No, no, she just compiles real raw data.
Real raw data, correct. Let me continue with this. Another question is just an example of positive, negative, or neutral, okay? We asked another leading question, okay? Because that's how we were attacked. You guys asked tons of leading questions. Well, here's the other so-called leading question, okay? If you could stop your ET contact, would you? Is that a leading question?
Not at all.
Not at all. Well, 84% said no, don't make it stop. Keep it coming, baby. Keep it coming.
Yeah, listen, a leading questions when they're like, hey, when you saw the alien, where was, like, they're putting it in your head and in your mind that you saw this, right? It's a little different. Like what you're asking is, I feel like the questions you have are something you would find out at college, when you're entering into a study. Like this is the same.
It's straightforward.
Right.
And so 84% no, don't make it stop. Okay. Another question that we had, okay. Do you believe that ETs are bad, malevolent, or evil? Because that's what you hear all the time on the internet, right? And by David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins. Well, guess what? 91% said no. Okay? So these three questions that I just presented are just examples of the more than 40 questions that we asked where the experiences were positive, negative, or neutral. We also asked questions about the different types of beings that people were seeing. We found out was that over 40% of these people said other. It wasn't one of those 12 beings that you put up there, Ray. It was something else, okay?
Right.
Also, what we found out was the number one type of being was not the small grays, was the energy being. 1,305 people. Well, that was out of three, when we took the collection at 3,500, okay? Right. But anyway, at that point, it was 55% of the people said energy beings. Human-looking beings, 52%. The short grays was 51%. The spirit or the ghost was 47%.
How did you discern the difference from the spirit and ghost and the energy?
Well, we had like a definition to each one. The ghost was like a humanoid-looking figure.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But that was like translucent, that would appear in a ghost-like or spirit-like form. Okay. The energy being did not have a humanoid form. Okay.
Right.
And so what we found out in terms of the percent that viewed it as negative, the short grays was 10.5%. That had the highest rate.
Well, that makes sense because, Ray, real quick, let me give you a theory I have on the grays.
Yeah. But only 10.5% viewed it as negative.
Right.
But yet, if you go to the internet, it portrays it like every one of these experiences were negative.
Oh, that's because it's fascinating and it's also misleading and it makes it easy to control, right? That's unfortunate. So for me, the grays, I think the grays are an advanced biological robot that's being rented by our actual observers are renting these little robots out for other beings. Say, look, these are our probes. They get out there and do it. They're reliable. This is the new 2022 model. I think those are just the robotic ones. And it's probably why people feel negative, because when you're an advanced robot, you don't show emotion on your face. You know, you're just there observing, scanning. So I could see those having some of the negativity. As far as the other beings go, I would understand people not thinking them to be negative, especially if they're not coming back, you know, physically harmed in any sense or another.
Yeah. Well, what we found out was that that rate of 10.5% was the highest negativity, with the exception of the reptilian beings. The reptilian beings had only 23% negativity. Okay.
Right.
The overwhelming number was neutral. That was 60%, just like the short grays. The short grays had 59% as neutral, okay? But when we looked at the open-ended questions, the people that had reptilian experiences, and mind you, this is not 3 or 4 or 5 people that have reptilian experiences. This was 644, okay?
Yeah.
This is a hell of a lot of the people, okay? So we looked at what they wrote out, the details of their reptilian experiences, and what we found out was not that these reptilian beings was actually Barack Obama, the Queen of England, or it ate their child and raped their wife. No. What we found out was that 23% said it was negative because these people were frightened of their physicality.
Right.
And the reptilian being was commonly portrayed as 7 to 8 feet tall, like 450 to 500 pounds, had the body of Arnold Schwarzenegger. It had dressed in an outfit like a crocodile. Okay,
Right.
It had like cat-like eyes, you know, and most of the time they appeared very close to the human. Okay, it wasn't like at a distance. No, it was like almost right in your face. Okay,
Right.
so when they would appear, all of a sudden people would be, you know, crapping in their pants. Okay, and so this is data. Those are hardcore facts. Okay, not all this bullshit that's being circulating on the internet. Okay.
Yeah.
And we did have like 3 or 4 people said that, oh, he raped me, you know, he made me, you know, come like 40 times when he raped me. You know, those answers out of like 644, those are called outliers, you know,
Right.
and they don't match anything else that you're getting. And so the outliers and statistics, you throw them away. Okay. And so that was another major finding of even the different types of beings. People were saying that they were not, you know, majority negative. Well, it was because of their physical appearance.
Yeah, it's human nature. Like, listen, when I was a kid, when I was a little kid in Brooklyn, the superintendent of my building had a big afro, and I was terrified of him. So someone told me his head was going to explode. So that's for people, right? Because at first appearance, he's this big, tall guy with an enormous head. So I'm terrified of this guy. Not until I speak to him and you find out it's a hairdo. But that's the nature of humans. We're very visual, which also makes us kind of judgmental. It's kind of sad. But that's I think that's where that dwells from.
Yep, exactly. No, I'm in agreement. The other major finding, in terms of the detail of it, was that these contact experiences resulted in a positive transformation of the experiencer. In terms of our data, we got our data from the questions that we asked to get to this. I called Dr. Kenneth Ring because in 1986 he had published a book titled The Omega Project: Near-Death Experiences, UFO Encounters, and the Mind at Large. And what he did, he asked over 400 questions. His book was a statistical research study. Kenneth Ring was a professor of psychology at the University of Connecticut. He's now in his mid-80s. He's been retired for several years now. And what he did was one of the first statistical research studies where he compared UFO contact experiencers and near-death experiencers. And at that time, he was one of the leading researchers on near-death experiences. It was him and Dr. Bruce Grayson were the 2 leading academic researchers on NDEs. Okay, so this man was, you know, a full tenured professor, and he was encountering many people that had NDEs that also had UFO abduction experiences, and he saw how these people were having similar transformations. So he asked 70 questions, and what he found out was that depending on the question asked, between 75% to 95% changed towards the positive in the different questions that were asked. So, for example, we had this question: how did UFO contact change your life? Well, 51% said highly positive change. 22% said slightly positive. So right there you had 73% that had a positive effect on changing their life. In terms of neutral effect, that didn't have any change, was 17%. In terms of slightly negative effect on their life, 6%, and highly negative effect on changing their life was 4%. So again, this is, data.
Right.
We had this question since my first UFO contact experience, and then we asked various questions, and the responses were strongly increased, increased somewhat, had not changed, decreased somewhat, and strongly decreased. So let's look at what increased, either strongly increased or increased somewhat. Okay. My desire to help others. Okay. 75%. My compassion for others. 80%.
Huh.
My appreciation of the ordinary things of life. 74%. My sensitivity to the suffering of others. 78%. My concern with spiritual matters, okay, increased by 83% of these people. So 83 of these percent of these people begin to have a greater spirituality. My desire to achieve a higher consciousness, almost 90%. Okay. My appreciation of nature, 84%. My spiritual feelings, 83%. My concern with the welfare of planet Earth, 85%.
Wow.
All of a sudden, they became tree huggers. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's
I could go on and on. Okay.
Well, I mean, to example that, just by what I'm hearing, there's a lot of people that when they go on, like for the first time, they go out on safari or they observe nature.
Yeah.
Something happens to them. They care about animals more. They care about the planet more. So whatever's happening with these people, it's a form of enlightenment that's making you see things differently.
It's an awakening. That's right. What all the experiences via the contact modalities. It's an awakening of humanity to understand that you are an eternal spiritual being. Okay, and that doesn't happen overnight. Okay, right. That takes place over many years. Now, I want to also take a look at what decreased. Okay.
Okay. So
what decreased was my concern with material things. All of a sudden, they didn't care about, my new Mercedes-Benz every year. Let's drive that old Honda Accord. If it still works, okay.
Right.
My interest in organized religion decreased. My competitive tendencies. All of a sudden, you don't stomp on your a co-worker so you can get the promotion. Okay. My fear of death decreased by 83%. Isn't that crazy?
I'm glad. Listen, I'm glad you said that, because eventually I'm going to go out and do a documentary, and I'm going to do it because it's going to be about everything, the paranormal, UFOs, everything. If I go out there and I see a ghost, I'm going to feel way less. My mortality is never going to be questioned again. I'm not going to worry about it. It's going to be the least of my concerns. I know there's something else, so I could see that.
Well, the last one category of decreased is my desire to become well-known, to become famous. Right. All of a sudden, that's not important in life anymore. So what you had, just with this little sample, we asked over 70 questions, was you had these people radically changing, okay, in their worldview, in numerous categories. And two examples that I mentioned before, and I'll say it again. Kathleen Martin, her worldview when she was young was her work on alien abductions, okay? Right. She wrote the book Captured, the Benny and Barney Hill UFO experience, okay? So again, she started off as one of these people viewing the alien abduction phenomenon, which a lot of people viewed it as highly negative, okay?
Right.
Recently, she published a book titled Forbidden Knowledge, A Personal Journey from Alien Abduction to Spiritual Transformation. Okay, so she's just an example of the thousands of people that took our survey, how they totally changed. Another person, Whitley Strieber, okay, he set the agenda, the tone for UFO contact with David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins when he published his book Communion, a book that described, anal probes and that these experiences were highly negative, okay? Right. And now look at his last book, okay, The Afterlife Revolution, where he writes about his communication with his dead wife. Okay?
Right.
All about spirituality, God, and the afterlife. Okay? That's yet another example. So this is what's taking place in the field of UFO contact. Okay?
Let's talk about the Matrix reality. That's got my full attention.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Let me just touch one more topic. Which is of your interest, which is that UAP contact experiencers have had primarily paranormal and not physical contact experiences. Okay?
Right.
And so let me go into that. Goodness, I had a PowerPoint up, but let me go. Okay. Out-of-body experiences. 80% of these people had them. Near-death experiences, 37%. Medical healings, 50%. Telepathic communications, 78%. Being brought to matrix reality, which I'll talk in detail in a couple of minutes, okay? 50%. Past life memories, 66%. Okay? Have seen a ghost or a spirit, 76%. Have actually communicated with a ghost or a spirit, okay? 61%. Have seen small colored orbs, 67%. Have seen an aport, which is a material object that mysteriously just appeared right in front of you, 25%. Have had objects fall or suddenly move around you without any reasonable explanation, 61%. Can see or feel energy auras around people, 74%. Okay, so in terms of communication received from non-human intelligence, 75% that said that the communication was in their language. Same thing if it was French, or in our German survey, or in our Slovak survey, or a French survey, the same thing. The overwhelming number said, yes, they communicated in my language, okay? 61% that imparted reassuring messages. 54% were given a message about spirituality. 54% were given a message about love or oneness. 45% told them about humanity's behavior and future, that we might be killing ourselves as humans. 42% received information about advanced technology, physics, or science. Look at that, huge number, 42%.
Yeah.
39% received an environmental message about planet Earth. 31% received a message about God or our creator. Okay? And now, in terms of abductions versus non-abductions, like I said before, only 1/3 had an abduction. Okay? Now, let's look in terms of this contact of a matrix reality. Okay?
Right.
50% of these people that took our survey said that they were brought to another matrix reality. That happened to me. I won't give you the details because I'll take a whole show to describe that experience, okay? But basically, I was driving my car, and all of a sudden, I'm not in my car anymore, in the middle of a traffic jam, okay? And I was taken outside of space, outside of time, because when I was, it felt like I was out there for 30 minutes, being shown all these, the consciousness and the nature of the contact modalities, that it's all one phenomenon. And then when I was brought back, I was still in my car listening to the same radio interview on public radio station, and not even a second was skipped. Okay.
Huh.
So, but we asked this question of the 50% that were brought to another reality. Okay. We asked the question was numerous questions, and then I'm just going to give you the percentages. Was your consciousness separated from your body? Like in my case, 67% said yes. Were your senses more vivid than usual? 76%. Did your thoughts speed up? 57%. Did you encounter a mystical being? 79%. Did this reality, this multidimensional reality, seem real to you? 84% said real. Okay. Did you have a feeling of peace or pleasantness? 74%. Did you see or feel surrounded by brilliant light? 52%. Did you perceive that time did not exist? 71%.
Wow.
Okay. Did scenes from the past come to you? 37%. Did time seem to speed up or slow down? 76%.
Wow.
Did you feel a sense of harmony or unity within the universe? 69%. Okay. Did you suddenly seem to understand everything? And that's what happened to Edgar Mitchell when he was out in space. He had a samadhi experience where he seemed to have universal knowledge, and just as quickly was taken away from him. Okay. Well, 59% that took our survey said yes. When I was in this matrix reality, I suddenly seemed to understand everything.
Huh.
Okay. Now, does scenes from the future come to you? 41%. Does scenes from the past come to you? 31%. Okay. Now, in terms of the medical healings, as I said before, 50% of these people stated that they had a miraculous medical healing. If you send me an email, okay, to info@agreaterreality.com, I will send you chapter 6, which is our 10 case studies of UFO healings. But we had 50% of these people that wrote out the details of the medical healings. Now let's talk about spirituality. Did you have any questions about the matrix reality?
Yeah, in the matrix reality, was it like a 3D experience, or was it something more 2D, like when you're looking down, something like you would look down upon? I mean,
well, people saw it like as if you had an out-of-body experience,
right? So,
or like, as if you've had an astral travel experience, sort of like that picture with what was that Academy Award winning artist that Carl Sagan wrote the book Contact? That movie Contact?
Yeah, Contact. Yeah.
It was very, very similar to that, okay? Where you're like in this 3D reality where you're having information being conveyed to you telepathically, okay? It wasn't like mouth to mouth and like in that movie Contact, okay?
Right.
And you knew that you weren't on planet Earth, okay, but yet you still had your senses, okay.
Well, you know, that being said, so I mean, what puts my mind is this: the different information people give about their messages, their positive, negative. If we were gonna to another planet and we saw that there's something going on there, we would want to give information to different individuals we feel can utilize that information, not just give everyone the same information, right? And that's what I'm starting to pick up from this.
Yeah, well, what it is that these experiences are very, very similar to like an astral travel experience, okay,
right, or
to an out-of-body experience. And I'll go into those two different phenomena. One, the clairvoyance with the out-of-body experience with remote viewing, that deals your consciousness being separate from your body, but you're still perceiving it, your reality, within the 3D material reality. You're still on planet Earth,
right?
Okay? You're like the remote viewers. They're still on planet Earth. Their consciousness might go to a secret, Russian military base, that sort of thing.
Right. It operates in a parallel.
But it's still what you're seeing is the 3D reality of planet Earth,
right.
Or if you decide to go to the moon or another planet, you're still within that 3D reality. Now, astral traveling and some of these multidimensional experiences have that additional combination is that is very similar to like astral traveling, where your consciousness has gone beyond the 4D reality of out-of-body experiences and remote viewing, okay? Right. And you're going into other non-physical realities, okay? I hope I'm explaining it.
Yeah,
okay?
I mean, here's how I hear it, right? So for listeners that aren't grabbing it, so when you look at a cosmic web, I said this a lot, it looks like fiber optic cables connecting everything, and your consciousness, which I think is also your soul, it's an energy, same thing.
Whatever you want to describe it,
right? And so that could travel through the cosmic web, virtually any direction it wants at any rate of speed it wants. Because I just recently learned that 5% of the space is the baryonic matter, 25% is dark matter, and like 70% is dark energy. So there's this enormous amount of energy connection out there. So for speaking of parallels, matrix, or outer body experiences, there's connections to everything. We just can't perceive them. And that's what it comes down to, is perception.
Yeah. I mean, we've had at one time 5 PhD physicists in our organization, okay? And I received a lot of training from them. And one thing I did not realize was that even an atom, if you look at the distance, with the size of a neutron,
Right.
and the electrons, it seems like the planets in our solar system. Okay, it's like here is planet Earth. That might be a neutron, and all of a sudden, Pluto is the closest electron that's floating around. Okay, those are the distance in space. But yet, when we are taking a chemistry class or a physics class, we're not taught these things, and we think that these objects are very close, to the inner mechanisms of the atom. But no, there are great distances. So there are large areas that there's no matter associated with it. Okay,
right.
But what I was attempting to describe before is that these individuals that are brought to these other realities, okay, most of these realities can be described not typical to an out-of-body experience or remote viewers, okay, or clairvoyance, where people are being, your consciousness is being brought to a physical plane, the earthly physical plane. These people's consciousness have busted through that barrier, which I call this that barrier. The first barrier is our 3D reality, which is what we perceive via our 5 senses. Okay, and that's what cognitive neurosciences tells you. Okay, then the next barrier on top of that is the barrier that I call 4D reality. That's where you have the people that do out-of-body experiences, the people that are able to do remote viewers, the people that do traveling, but within this 3D reality. So, but once you bust that reality, which I call the 4D reality, then you're into other dimensions that cannot be considered, planet Earth, or physical reality. You've gone into a hierarchy of other realms. There's different terminologies that people use depending if you take it from a more metaphysical approach. Higher densities. To me, it doesn't matter what you call it, but what it is that your consciousness is not any longer in this 3D reality or in the 4D reality, like you're having an out-of-body experiences. Astral traveling is all of a sudden like Preston Dennett. You need to be able to interview him. He's not only a brilliant researcher in the field of ufology and the paranormal, he's also a major contact experiencer. And his major mechanism for having experiences is astral travel. It took him many, many years to learn how to control his out-of-body experiences. But then once he learned how to control his out-of-body experiences, then he began to try to self-impose astral travel, where he would break out of this material 4D reality of an out-of-body experiences and go into other dimensions. And he finally was able to do it. And now he pretty much can do it fairly easily. And once he breaks that realm, it's all of a sudden, if he wants to talk to his mother, he'll just yell out, "Mama, Mama," and boom, his mom appears to him, holographically.
Right.
And he can create a scenario where he's interacting with his mother.
And that's
his mother can create, his mother's consciousness can create a scenario to interact with him.
What's Preston's last name?
Dennett, Dennett. You can look him up on the internet or on Amazon, and you'll see he's had over 25 books that he's published.
All right. I'll check him out for certain.
And he's a great interview. And so the astral travel is very similar to what these individuals are having, where they're being brought to these other matrix-like realities. It's very much like astral traveling, but the experiencer did not initiate it for the vast majority of these cases. It was non-human intelligence that initiated. Okay.
Right.
Let me give you an example so your audience members can understand. Okay. I have a very close friend in Miami. Okay. No one knows about him. Okay. But yet I consider him the top 4 or 5 of the major contact experiencers that I've met, and also through our research study. He's had some unbelievable experiences. He's had everything in the kitchen sink. But yet his wife is a PhD psychologist. His daughter's a PhD psychologist. And he is retired DEA federal manager, not agent, manager. Okay. He was responsible for the whole Caribbean area for many years. And I know because I've seen his plaques on the wall. I have his book, his latest book, which is titled Chasing Dictators. Okay. He was the one that brought down Manuel Noriega from Panama. Oh, wow. And also Baby Doc Duvalier from Haiti. So, I mean, he's the real deal.
You got to connect me with him. I would love to have him on the show as well.
Oh, he's not public. He's not public.
Oh, he's not.
I can connect you with other people that are major contact experiencers that you could interview. And so, anyway, Alberto told me a story. All of a sudden, he's watching TV on his sofa. Many experiences start like that, and he calls me. He said, "Ray, guess who showed up? In front of my TV the other day." I said, "Well, tell me," because he's always telling me stories, right?
Right.
So Zeus. I said, "What do you mean, Zeus?" He says, "Well, I don't know what to describe him, but he was a human-looking man. He was like 7 feet tall, had muscles like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He had a super long beard, and he was wearing like a Greek tunic. And so he looked like Zeus. So in my mind, I said, here's Zeus. God's coming to visit me." So he said, "Alberto, you've been thinking about death lately." He says, there's no need to fear death. Okay. And all of a sudden gave him a near-death experience. Okay. And during that whole travel, this being was with him that Alberto could see him, physically with his eyes, and then brought him to a matrix reality and was teaching him all about, when you die. Okay, in the spirit world. Okay. And then all of a sudden, after he gave him that lesson and brought him to this matrix reality, boom, Alberto's back in his sofa watching, the Late Show, with Johnny Carson or something,
Yeah.
And so he's had many experiences like that. But yet that's an example of being brought to a matrix reality where it's not like an out-of-body experience where you see your dead body and your sleeping body underneath you, or you're floating around your neighborhood and things like that. No, it's much more closer to like an astral travel, much more closer to a near-death experience where you're being brought to these other realities.
Huh. Yeah, I wonder if they allow you to see them as what you feel is explainable, right? Because, all right, for example, if one shows up to me, maybe it comes as Luke Skywalker. Right, because that's acceptable.
That's exactly what's taking place.
Okay,
this phenomenon. Okay, and again, ufology doesn't talk about this because all these clowns that orchestrating ufology conferences, they see what we're doing as woo-woo science. Okay, because ufology for so many years has totally banned anything that was paranormal related, anything that was consciousness related. But yet, as I said before, we've got the PhDs. They don't. Okay. Right. Our new book has over 25 PhD scientists. And hopefully we'll have some time to go into the new book. What was the question that you asked?
You should, about how we perceive them and what they.
Oh, yes. Correct. Yeah. What we're seeing are actually holographic projections from another reality. And in terms of the types of beings that people are seeing, we documented thousands of different types of beings. We just had 12 in our survey. But when people were asked to write out the different types of beings that we're seeing, it was like almost everything. Even a big, gigantic booger, there was one person that wrote like a big, gigantic booger that was like 3 feet wide, was hanging in the corner of her living room, telepathically communicating with her. Okay. This very famous contactee, Mike Cleveland, who actually was one of those people that went to Bud Hopkins, and Bud Hopkins said, "Oh, I'm a little bit busy. Maybe you ought to see Leo Sprinkle." Why? Because his experiences were not negative. So Mike Cleveland has seen tons of different animals, large animals, like especially owls, 6-foot owls. There was another major Academy Award winner, and I spoke to the man. He's very, very famous. He's a producer. 3 years ago, he won Best Picture. Okay, or 4 years ago. I forgot what it is. So anyway, I'm talking to him, and he was telling me that his wife was in their bathroom, walked into the bathroom, and sitting on a bathroom vanity was a 6-foot owl with legs like a human, and his legs were crossed. Okay? And so that's just an example.
Right.
People are seeing everything. In terms of the UFOs, same thing. People were seeing everything outside of a flying saucer. They're seeing everything. Like in my case, every time I call down a quote UFO, they've had all different physical appearances, but the vast majority of them were non-physical. Only one time was it a pure cylinder, large cylinder, like a Goodyear blimp, silverish in color. The first time I realized was this when I called down a UAP, and all of a sudden this huge object appeared 30 feet on top of us, of my daughter and these 3 friends. My friends tried to begin to explain it away because it was not physical. It was hundreds of oblong streaks of light that formed the whole skeleton of this object. And inside was all this white plasma. So when my friends came in the middle of me watching this, 2 adults and their 17-year-old daughter, they began to try to explain it away. Okay, they said, "Ray, what the hell is this?" I said, "You know damn well what it is." "No, it can't be. It can't be." So after like 2 minutes of like really crazy explanations, I busted out laughing. And in my head, I communicated to this intelligence. I don't call them beings. I call it to this intelligence. And I said, "You better come up with some better shit than this because my friends don't believe you." So instantaneously, what I was watching totally disappeared. And now it was replaced by like 100 stars, huge stars that were inside this object where that object was. Okay. And they were all blinking on and off, on and off, on and off. And they would take turns powering up like the size of the moon. So it was a totally different visual display. So they got rid of the old stuff, instantaneously replaced by something new. Okay. So it's like a holographic projection. It's like, okay, what we gave them was not good. Let's get rid of that crap. Let's throw something else.
Yeah. If you look at the human brain under MRI with contrast, it's literally the most complex computer on planet Earth. And it definitely looks like it has the ability to be receptive, right? And so that being said, I feel that some people just have a download that other people don't, right? And they can perceive things that other people can't. That's what I'm starting to get. That's the feeling I get anyway.
Well, what cognitive neurosciences teaches us is that consciousness begins and ends with the brain. Okay?
Right.
Once we die, consciousness dies, and that's it. Okay? But the whole field of near-death experiences, of out-of-body experiences, astral traveling, remote viewing, all of this phenomenon, especially the NDE phenomenon, teaches you that consciousness survives your physical death. Okay? The numerous near-death experience stories where, like, for example, Dr. Eben Alexander, who is a Harvard medical school professor of neurosurgery, his brain was like mashed potatoes, totally eaten up by a bacteria. Okay,
right.
His brain waves, I forgot the terminology that they use for that, were like pretty much non-existent. Okay, numerous other individuals I've described very similar damage to their brains. Okay, or they were literally dead. They had no neural transmission from their brain and no heartbeat. The heart wasn't pumping at all, and they were dead for a very, very long time. But yet, these people were having very vivid, very conscious experiences via their NDEs. That they went into details, and some of these experiences lasted for hours, days, and in my father's case, 20 to 30 years. Okay. But so that's why cognitive neuroscience, these people, that's the old paradigm of the nature of our reality.
Well, that was my biggest fear for a long time, is that my brain, so I viewed a brain as a computer. And before, learning what I've learned currently and getting more involved in what I'm doing, I was always afraid that when you died, the computer turned off and that was it. And then everything here just mattered nothing. And I'm a pretty nostalgic person. I would hate to think everything I did here mattered for nothing, right?
Yeah. Well, the brain is a computer, but for your 3D reality.
Right.
Okay. But consciousness is independent of the heart or the brain. Okay.
Right.
All you need to have had is an out-of-body experience where all of a sudden you're floating above your body, you're seeing your body underneath you, and you're like, what the hell is this? So like that, that consciousness is totally separate from your physical body. Okay. That's a classic example right there. Okay.
I agree.
And
I have this idea, and it's in previous podcasts I've spoken about it, that when I think Earth is a proving ground, I think there's many Earths and many different, universes, right? And so when you die here, your energy either recycles, right? Or, you come back here because you didn't do things so great here. So you recycle and you got to start over again. Or you did things really amazing here. We need you again, recycle and you're back. Or your energy goes to the next plane, right?
Yeah. Well, let's get into the spirituality aspect of it.
Sure.
People were taught lessons about spirituality. And then I'll get back to your question, okay?
Okay.
97% believe that non-human intelligence can travel to other dimensions. 91% believe that there's a grand plan in motion and that experiencers are all part of that grand plan, just like what you've been talking about, okay? 89% believe that there's a connection between non-human intelligence and the paranormal. 83% that there is a connection between non-human intelligence and the spirit world or the afterlife. Now, in terms of messages that they were given directly by non-human intelligence, 31% were given a message about God. Okay, that's 1 out of every 3 people.
Right.
30% were told about the death process in the spirit world. 28% were told where they are from. 26% were given a message about reincarnation. Okay. Now, in terms of what the researchers in our organization believe, we believe is that the experiencers of the contact modalities, and I failed to define what that is, the contact modalities. It's a term that I coined in 2013 based upon the paranormal out-of-body experiences I had when I was brought to a matrix reality while I was driving my car. Okay. I won't go into the details of that, but basically what I was shown was that all of the paranormal is actually one phenomenon and needs to be studied as one phenomenon. And that right now humans are studying that as separate and distinct. Okay. All the UFO folks do not believe that NDEs have anything to do with UFOs. The NDE folks, you go to their national conference of the International Association of Near-Death Studies, which I went to. What the hell does UFOs have to do with NDEs? What the hell does out-of-body experiences have to do with NDEs? Okay. What does remote viewing have to do with NDEs? Same thing with, you go to a remote viewers, national conference outside of a few people, they'll say the same thing. What the hell does, UFOs have to do with remote viewing? On and on and on. And what we're arguing, the academics in our organization, which is 25 academics, 20 academics and 5 medical doctors, that all of them need to be seen as one phenomenon. Okay. Now, what we believe is that what we're encountering with, that these are holographic projections, that instead of the term multidimensional, we prefer the term interdimensional. Why? Because it talks about consciousness. Interdimensional experiences are experiences involving consciousness, okay? And you interacting with our multidimensional reality. Okay, multidimensional people still view it as a physicalist phenomenon, which is physical, but in another dimension. Okay, but when you get into interdimensional, then now you're talking about consciousness.
Right.
Okay, and so, for example, in ufology, probably the most famous researcher in ufology is J. Allen Hynek. Okay, in the very beginning, he was hired by Project Blue Book to totally dismiss UFOs. Okay, after many years, he realized that, holy cow, UFOs are real, they exist, but he still had a materialist perspective. But towards the end of his life, he said that the UFO phenomenon might be an interdimensional phenomenon based upon consciousness. Okay, and that was just until the very end of his life. Okay, now Dr. Jacques Vallet, who was pictured in that movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he was the French guy in that movie.
Right.
I consider him the father of modern ufology. He took over what J. Allen Hynek was moving towards. And 40 years ago, Vallet said that he did not associate UFOs as part of one integrated phenomenon. Excuse me, as that he now saw UFOs as part of an integrated phenomenon involving all
everything,
the contact modalities.
right?
What he said, and I could quote him on it. He said, "I will be disappointed if UFOs turn out to be nothing more than visitors from another planet." And when someone asked him, I said, "Could they be, beings from another dimension?" He said, "I think that the UFO phenomenon is teaching us that we just do not understand time and space." Okay,
right.
And he said, "Here we have physical objects that are physical. They interact with humans, and yet are capable of manipulating time and space in ways that go beyond what is our understanding of physics today." So he clearly saw them from a totally different perspective. Okay, and that's the perspective that all of the members of our organization, of our new organization, the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, we believe that all of the paranormal, which I call the contact modalities, and now that term is being used much more frequently. People are borrowing that term, and they're saying that it's all one phenomenon. Yeah. And now some of the commonalities of these contact modalities, of near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, UFO contact, remote viewing, people see ghosts and spirits. Number one is that there's telepathic communications that are taking place among all of them with non-human intelligence. And the communication is taking place in their native language. Okay? Oh. With a near-death experience, you have telepathic communications. You don't have people communicating mouth to mouth, lips to lips. Okay?
Right.
With UFO contact, the same thing. All the beings that are communicating with these individuals in UFO contact is telepathic communication. Now, one person has said they're moving their mouths and they're talking to me. No. Same thing with out-of-body experiences and astral traveling. And even people have had remote viewing communication. The communication has been telepathic and it's in their native language. Okay. The other topic is associated as medical healings. The whole NDE phenomenon has medical healings all over the place. Same thing, just like UFO contact. With NDEs, people are being shown visions of the future and visions of the past, just like the UFO contact phenomenon. I already talked about the total personality transformation. That involves NDE experiencers, UFO contact experiencers, people that have seen ghosts and spirits, out-of-body experiences, okay? Also, all these phenomena involve being taken to a matrix reality, okay? When you have an NDE, by definition, you're brought to a matrix reality. 50% of the UFO contact folks, experiencers, are brought to a matrix reality. By definition, out-of-body experiences, astral traveling, remote viewers are being brought to another reality, okay? Another dimension, okay? Also, all of these individuals, after they have their initial experience, all of a sudden they begin to have a vast array of paranormal experiences, okay? Near-death experiencers. If I had $1 for every near-death experience that later on saw a deceased person, okay, I would have my pockets full of cash.
Okay? Ray, real quick, what I'm getting from something like a light bulb went off in my head, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm hearing you speak. So, granted, we're biological here on Earth. We have biology. We're flesh and bone. But our consciousness is a raw form of energy. And now when you're speaking of the matrix reality, it makes me wonder if our consciousness is put in place and then goes back to a server, right?
Exactly. You got it. Bingo. You won the lottery. You won the grand prize. You won the grand prize. Okay?
Thanks.
That's exactly what's taking place. Okay? With the near-death experience, okay, I'm good friends with many of the major NDE researchers. As I told you before, I started with Dr. Kenneth Ring, okay, back in the year 2014 it was, okay,
right,
where he allowed us to use 70 questions from his study, okay, the Omega Project. And Kenneth Ring, as I said earlier, was one of the top 2 academic researchers on NDEs. He was also one of the early co-founders of the International Association of Near-Death Studies. Okay, Dr. Jeffrey Long, who is up there among the top 5 NDE researchers. Okay, he's been conducting academic statistical research of NDE experiencers for over 20 years. He's one of the co-editors of our new book. Okay, and also I'm good friends with Raymond Moody. Okay, the founder of NDE, the term NDEs. Okay, and we also have an article being published in our book by Dr. Grayson, Dr. Bruce Grayson, who is a tenured professor at the University of Virginia in their School of Medicine. Okay, and also John Alexander. John Alexander, PhD, wrote his dissertation on the afterlife, became a president of the International Association of Near-Death Studies. Okay, so these are all major people that have researched NDEs for many, many, many years. And what they all have told me was that when we die, our consciousness gets brought to this other reality where we're greeted by the consciousness of deceased souls, mostly deceased relatives. 1 out of every 4 people has what is called a life review. That means they're being shown their life. They're being shown
all the data attached to their energy throughout
all the data. Yeah. Correct. It's all data that was being stored. Okay. And then several people that wrote chapters in our book, which I'm going to tell about in a couple of minutes, they talked about who they were. For example, one was a medical doctor. Her name is Dr. Melinda Greer. I can mention her name now because she just recently retired. Okay. And so what she wrote in her article was that all the data of who she was, Dr. Melinda Greer, when she had her near-death experiences, was uploaded to like a central database. Okay. Because what God is everything. It's the central consciousness data set.
An architect. Right?
It's like we're living inside a virtual reality. Okay.
Right.
And this is the computer programmer behind, everything. Okay. And so when we die, we rejoin God. We rejoin the central database. We also have an article by Dr. Tom Campbell, who's a physicist. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but he goes, he wrote a chapter for our book, and it's all about us living in a virtual reality and exactly about what I'm conveying and what you just raised, okay? How our consciousness, our individuated units of consciousness of our life's experiences here on Earth gets uploaded, okay? And so later on, after we remain as part of God for a certain period of time, we are not Dr. Melinda Greer anymore. We're just individual units of consciousness without a reference to a life. We might understand that we've had numerous lives,
right?
Okay,
right.
In the past previous to that. But all of these NDE researchers hypothesize that consciousness then reincarnates again for another journey, another experience. Okay, so then when we die, we bring that experience back to the mind of God. Okay, Dr. Ian Stevenson was a professor of psychiatry at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. Okay, back in 1962, the president of the university said, look, the inventor of the Xerox machine, okay, wants to, or has left in his will, okay, to the University of Virginia, millions of dollars, but it has to be towards studying the afterlife. Okay. And so he says, I forgot the exact amount. I'm just throwing out a number. But let's, for example, okay, here's $50 million in 1962. Okay. We heard that you have an interest in the paranormal and the afterlife. Would you be willing to take this money to do research on it? So Dr. Ian Stevenson, who was a professor at the School of Medicine, okay, psychiatry, said, yes, hell yeah, I'll go for it. So over time, he started to do research on reincarnation. And he published, I know of 2 major books, maybe there was a 3rd book that he published. Took him many years to get going, but these are academic research on the phenomenon of reincarnation, okay, with like thousands of case studies. And right before he passed away, I think 2 years before, he hired another PhD psychiatrist, another medical doctor. He brought him into University of Virginia School of Medicine. By then, he had about 5 or 6 PhD academics, and the institute became known as the Institute of Perceptual Studies, okay, and out of the University of Virginia. So this new person that he brought in, Dr. Jim Tucker, took over the work of Dr. Stevenson after he died, okay, and he also wrote 1 book, maybe 2 books, on reincarnation, okay. So what I'm telling you is directly from all of these NDE researchers, okay? So that's what I believe is going on. But again, this is, if these ufologists call us what we're doing woo-woo science, imagine of what I just told you, you know?
Well, yeah, here's what I look at it.
Yeah.
We here on Earth right now, let's break it down to grounded science that people could kind of understand.
Yeah.
When you have fiber optic cables and you send a signal to one computer to something in the server, it's using energy to send out information. So when you die, the energy, your consciousness / your soul, whatever, that has the data still attached. So when it goes back to the server, yes, it'd be cleaned and it gets a new body again, like that whole recycle thing. But there are some cases where people, like that kid, I always go to this kid. I read the story, it blew me away. He spoke in perfect detail about him being a pilot in World War II in great detail.
Very famous case.
Right.
Yes.
So that being said, like energy that you have, like your computer, if you wipe your computer clean tomorrow, you think it's clean, but the data is still there somewhere. It can be found. And I think this kid's energy, I think his data was still somewhat attached. And that's how he remembered his previous life.
Well, Doctor, as I said before, we're going to have in our new book, the article by Tom Campbell, okay? And we don't have enough time to go into details about Tom Campbell, but believe me, this guy is the real deal. He was one of the early scientists that worked with Robert Monroe at the Monroe Institute to be able to research and to document the out-of-body phenomena. Okay, so he got the point where he was able to control his OBEs, and then he began to control his astral travel experiences. And then him being a physicist that worked for various companies that were researching advanced weapon technologies, okay, for the arms industry, he was able to do controlled physics experiments out of body. Okay, and he eventually wrote a book titled My Big Toe, My Big Theory of Everything, which is his presentation that we live in a virtual reality. But in that presentation, he also says that consciousness is primary, that he had solved the unification theory of physics, and that all of the contact modalities, which is what I'm talking about, need to be studied as one phenomenon. And I'll send anyone that sends an email to me his chapter so you can read it. But another point I want to make is that Dr. Edgar Mitchell wrote what I consider his magnum opus, his most important writing. That article is titled The Quantum Hologram Theory of Consciousness. That article was only published in the Journal of Cosmology, which is the physics journal of Dr. Rudy Schild at Harvard. Okay, and even though it was published in a physics journal, it was written for the non-physicist, but it's still difficult to read. It wasn't easy because it was couched in physics terminology. Okay, now that article describes what is called non-local consciousness, how human consciousness is able to interact with what Edgar calls the zero-point energy fields. Okay, and is able to download information from our reality. And that explains the ESP phenomenon and also various forms of telepathy. For example, precognition. Let me give you a couple of examples, okay? After my wife had all these major contact experiences, her ability to have precognitive events was tremendously increased. For example, she would say, "No, we're not going to go on that trip, that long trip, because the engine's going to blow up in her car." And I'm like, I already bought the tickets for the hotel, for the conference, And no, I'm not going to go. The engine's going to blow up. Well, a week before, I said, what the hell? Let me bring it to a mechanic because she's not going to go unless, I get the car checked out. Expecting that nothing was going to happen with the car, right? Because she knew the mechanic is a friend of ours. Anyway, this friend of ours who was the mechanic said, "Thank God you didn't take that long trip, Ray, because the whole engine would have exploded. And these are the reasons why." Boom, 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 boom. Okay. So my wife knew what was going to happen in the future. Okay. That's called precognition. It's one of the main areas that's being studied for numerous years in the field of parapsychology. Okay. So Edgar Mitchell wrote about how that takes place, the mechanism, which is all physics. It's advanced physics. Okay. But he tried to explain it for the non-physicists. That's going to be an article. And so that whole mechanism of information being stored. And he said, like, the way you could think about it is you could think about it like in the ancient mystical texts, they talked about it as Akashic records. Okay. But Rudy Schild was the first one to describe many, many years before Stephen Hawking, that black holes were information storage devices. Okay. They store information. And so he and Edgar got together because Edgar understood that human consciousness can retrieve information. And Rudy's saying is that at the local level, at the galaxy level, okay, right. Black holes, each major galaxy has a black hole, okay, usually at the center of it, but a major black hole. And what Rudy was able to understand and to research and to document in over 300 peer-reviewed academic journals, okay? He taught at Harvard for 45 years. So he said that Stephen Hawking was completely wrong about black holes, that black holes are information storage devices, and on and on and on. Well, guess what? Years later, Stephen Hawking admitted he had been completely wrong about black holes, but yet people accepted Stephen Hawking because he was much more well-known than Rudy Schild. But Edgar Mitchell described the phenomenon of tapping into these storage devices, how humans are able to tap in. And a common way of thinking of it is the Akashic records, how we're able to tap into the Akashic records. Okay. And
now that you say that, you look at the galaxy and a black hole at the center of all of them, and that's information, right? Being said. Yeah. And how it spreads outward to the planets and stars. It's like there is a center of there, an architect, right? I keep saying this, like a source of energy.
God, just call it God.
Yeah.
It's the universal mind. Yeah.
Right. And so it's dispersing this information outward to all the different, it's like a chip. If you look down at the galaxy, it reminds me of like a really complex, large chip. So it's interesting. It's definitely food for thought. It's given me a lot to think about.
Well,
I'll tell you that.
I mean, all of the ancient mystical traditions talked about oneness. We're all one. Yeah. Everything is all interconnected. Okay. But what it was is that these concepts came to be totally dismissed by modern science because this was, mythology. Okay.
Right.
But yet almost all of the ancient mystical texts talked about the same thing. Okay. And but yet, what does quantum physics teach us? The very same thing. Okay. Let me give you a couple of quotes from some of the early quantum physicists. Okay. And this is important for people to understand that that this is not woo-woo science. This is actually hardcore physics. Okay. First of all, the concept of materialism, which is the total opposite. Our approach is a post-materialist view of reality. Materialism is the idea that matter is the only reality, and the belief system that the mind is nothing but the physical activities of the brain. Okay. Now, a post-materialist approach. Okay, a post-materialist approach of our reality says is the total opposite, that the mind can exist separate from the brain, and that consciousness is the key to understanding the nature of our reality and also the contact modalities. Okay. And a couple of quotes. Okay. Okay, hold on one second, and I'll get that for you. Okay, Max Planck, okay, one of the founders of quantum physics, Nobel Prize winners in physics, and I'm quoting him. He said, "I regard consciousness as fundamental." Now, is that woo-woo science, or is that real freaking science? Nobel Prize winner in physics. He says, "I regard matter as a derivative of consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing postulates consciousness." Okay? He's not the only one. Eugene Wigner, again, one of the founders of modern quantum physicists, also a Nobel Prize in physics, said, "It will remain remarkable in whatever way our future concepts may develop, that the very study of the external world led to the scientific conclusion that the content of the consciousness is the ultimate universal reality." Again, Nobel Prize winner in physics. Okay.
But those are great quotes.
Sir John Eccles. Okay. Nobel Prize in physiology and medicine. Nobel Prize. Okay. Physiology and medicine. Sir John Eccles. He said, quote, "I maintain that the human mystery is incredibly demeaned by scientific reductionism." In other words, the nuts and bolts approach, with its claims to account for all of the spiritual world in terms of patterns of neuronal activity. In other words, that everything begins and ends with the brain.
Right.
This belief must be classed as a superstition. So he's calling, okay, materialism a superstition. Okay. He says, we have to recognize that we are spiritual beings with souls existing in a spiritual world, as well as material beings with bodies and brains existing in a spiritual world. Now, again, this man won the Nobel Prize in physiology and medicine. Okay. And same thing with Erwin Schrödinger. Nobel Prize in physics. One of the pioneers, one of the inventors of quantum physics. The same thing, same concepts.
It's like to your point too, like being at a one, right? We all come from a source, and then the idea of collective consciousness as our being, because I think to have collective consciousness has to be at a spiritual level, right? At some level, because if you look at ancient man, pyramids on one continent, pyramids that are on another continent, pyramids that we're finding in China that are buried in whatever they're buried. But the point is, these structures very similar all around the world, and at that time, not that I'm aware of, did they have the internet or phones? How so similar? There's definitely something collective there. There's no question of that.
Yeah, well, that's what we're trying to do with our new book. Let me give you the title of our new book. It's going to be published on June 1st. And I said before, I'm going to be sending whoever sends an email to me 6 chapters from our new book. Okay. Now, the title of our new book, it's going to be 4 volumes. It's not going to be one book. Right. It's going to be 4 books. Okay. Each of the volumes is going to be over 600 pages. So we're going to talk about tons of information. Okay. Now, the title of our new book is A Greater Reality, the new paradigm of non-local consciousness, the paranormal, and the contact modalities. Okay. So a greater reality, why? Because we live inside a spiritual and virtual reality. Okay. We use the term the new paradigm because that term paradigm was taken from the book The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, which was published in 1962 by Thomas Kuhn, who was a professor at Harvard, at Berkeley, and at Princeton, PhD in physics also. And he talked about how the evolution of science changes over time via these radical breakthroughs. At first, the idea is totally dismissed by established science. Then it's a little bit more accepted. And then after all these dinosaurs die out, the new generation begins to embrace this new paradigm. And then eventually that new paradigm gets established. An example of that is quantum physics. Okay. Quantum physics took many, many years for it to become established. Why? Because the old physicists were tied to Einstein. And they just didn't understand the complexities of quantum physics. Even Einstein himself, until the very end, never really embraced quantum physics. Okay, so that's what we're calling it, a new paradigm. And we said the new paradigm of non-local consciousness because it's how we as humans are interacting with our external, multi-dimensional matrix reality and having contact with non-human intelligence via the contact modalities, which are defined as all the ways that humans are piercing the veil of our multi-dimensional reality and having contact with non-human intelligence, i.e. near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, UFOs, ghosts and spirits, hallucinogens, via remote viewing, via praying, post-death communications, channeling, energy healing, meditation, all of the ASP phenomenon, telekinesis, intuition, telepathy, mediumship, poltergeist, orbs, etc., etc. These are all phenomena associated with the contact modalities. What we're saying is that that all of the contact modalities need to be studied as one integrated phenomenon under consciousness. Now, the first two volumes of our book are theoretical in nature. Volumes 3 and 4, the last two volumes, are chapters written by major experiencers of the contact modalities. These are people that have had 3 or 4 different types of contact modalities experiences. And I talked earlier in your show about Dr. Melinda Greer. She's had 2 near-death experiences. She's seen 12 UFOs. She's had 3 up-close Sasquatch experiences. After her second NDE, she began to see dead people in her hospital that she works in, okay? And she's had, numerous experiences, ESP-related experiences, where she's able to able to see visions of the future and when things are going to happen. So this is a medical doctor. And I'll send you her chapter as well. Just send me an email to info@agreaterreality.org. Okay.
And I'll have that in the description. So if anyone wants to look for it, it'll be in description.
Yeah, yeah. And so the categories that we have in the first 2 volumes, the theoretical volumes, okay, we start off with a prologue by Dr. Jeffrey Kripal. Jeffrey Kripal was a professor of religion and philosophy at Rice University in Houston. Rice is like a little Harvard. Okay, you need a 1500 on your SATs to get admitted there. Okay, wow. It's a highly difficult academic research institute to get in. They have highly credible, reputable academics that teach there. So Jeffrey is now the dean of the School of Humanities at Rice University, but yet he's an experiencer, and he's written over 10 books associated with the paranormal and consciousness. So he wrote the prologue for our book. I'm writing the introduction, okay, introducing the whole book, okay? And then we have articles under the category of the primacy of consciousness and the contact modalities. So the focus here is that consciousness is primary, not our material reality. And we have articles by Dr. Eben Alexander, who I said before was a professor of neurosurgery at the Harvard Medical School. Okay, we have Dr. Larry Dossi, who's a medical doctor, Dr. Bruce Grayson, and Dr. Jim Tucker were these 2 professors that I told you at the University of Virginia School of Medicine, and Dr. Peter Sturrock is now an emeritus professor of physics at Stanford University. I mean, and they wrote this article titled "Consciousness: What Is It?" So again, this is not woo-woo science.
Yeah, I mean, you have an all-star cast, man, with a lot of
all-star
data.
cast, all-star cast. So we have about 8 different articles under the topic of the primacy of consciousness. After that, we have another category titled non-local consciousness, telepathy, and the quantum hologram. And that's, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chapters that focus on Dr. Edgar Mitchell's theory of non-local consciousness, okay, that explains it and elaborates it in detail. And then we have the next category of near-death experiences, the title of Near-Death Experiences and the Survival of Consciousness. And the first chapter is written by a PhD academic that got a PhD from New York University. And she won one of the runner-up prizes for the Bob Bigelow Prize on Consciousness. Okay, she was given $50,000. Okay, wow. We also have an article by the winner, Dr. Jeffrey Mishloff, who won $500,000. He was the grand prize winner. Okay, and then we have an article by Dr. Bruce Grayson, the professor at the University of Virginia School of Medicine, Dr. Jeffrey Long, who was one of the co-editors of our book and one of the major near-death experience researchers, and Raymond Moody. Okay, and then we have another category. We have 3 articles on the category of out-of-body experiences, remote viewing, and consciousness. Okay, and Stephen A. Schwartz was the founder of modern remote viewing. Okay, this guy was a founder. He established non-coordinate remote viewing in the early 1970s. Okay, the man is brilliant. He's a genius. He's written hundreds of peer-reviewed publications.
I mean, so people understand is, let's put it in baseball terms. You put together the 1997 Yankees. You know what I mean? That's
together with the other individuals who made the All-Star team in 1997.
Right, yeah. So, okay. I mean, the information that you're gathering and the people you have in your corner, this is for people that want to learn about this subject. This is, you guys, you got the team. You know, there's a guy named Steve Murr I want to connect you with. I don't know if you've heard of Steve Murr.
No, I don't know who he is.
So he, like you, believes they should not compartmentalize paranormal and ufology, and he thinks these things should be looked at as a whole, just the same as you.
Correct.
So yeah. I've had him on a number of times. If you ever get the opportunity to listen to some of the podcasts I had with him,
I need you to introduce me by email.
Yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to make. So before we close tonight, because I'm going to connect you with him straight after this, because you have to have this guy. He has amazing think tanks, and I think you guys would connect well.
Yeah.
So before we close tonight,
before you finish out, let's just say that the other categories I have are out-of-body experiences, remote viewing, and consciousness, which is what I just talked about. We also have an article on lucid dreams. Then we have a separate category. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different articles on ghosts and spirits and spiritual transformation. Okay, and then we have entheogenic research, commonly known as hallucinogens. And consciousness. And again, we have 2 articles that talk about once you take these hallucinogens, which is DMT or ayahuasca or psilocybin, which is the ingredient in magic mushrooms, 50% of these people are having communications with non-human intelligence, okay? So we've got these 2 professors. One of them is a professor at a major medical school, Johns Hopkins University. School of Medicine, Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. So we've got 2 articles that discuss that. And then we have 11 articles on UFOs, 11 chapters, all discussing UFOs from a total consciousness-based perspective. And then we have a category titled Future Research of the organization. I mean, where do we take what we're doing to the next step in terms of academic research? And then we've got 4 articles which are conclusion articles, like summaries and wraparounds. And again, we've got numerous retired PhD academics that are writing these conclusionary articles. So again, as you said, this 1997 Yankees, plus the members of the All-Star team from both the National League and the American League in here. And it's a total radical paradigm that we're presenting.
Agreed. You know, I mean, so I'm going to end up having to have you on a lot for each chapter because there's so much information. There's just so much. I mean, so we're definitely going to talk in terms of having you on again. For those that want to know, where can people find you? Like if they want to like listen to lectures or anything like that.
Well, given the nature of the work that I do, I'm not invited to UFO conferences. Okay, right. One of the few organizations that I was recently invited to was the Arkansas UFO Conference, and that was because that was sponsored by the daughter of Dolores Cannon. So myself and Dr. John Alexander, he's a member of our organization. We spoke about consciousness and UFOs, but everyone else that spoke there were all these nuts and bolts folks.
Right.
And so, I've never even been contacted by what they call it, the International UFO Conference, whatever that they have in Arizona, Phoenix, any of those folks, because I don't deal with ufology. Okay.
Right.
So the NDE experiencers as well. I don't deal with NDE research. It's like a totally new paradigm. I'm going to have to invent my own conference so I can invite myself to talk.
Well, here's what I'll do for you. I'll have you on pretty frequently. We'll pick different subjects each time. So this way, because I'm sure people can have a ton of questions. There was a lot of information on just this one podcast.
You said, yeah.
I handwrite notes still, and I'm over here filling up page after page. So that being said, we're going to say goodnight. I'm going to talk to Ray in post and get some things scheduled up. And everything Ray had noted, I will put in description so everyone can find it.
So once again, my email is info, I-N-F-O, at agreaterreality.com. And I will send you numerous chapters from my 2 books.
Excellent. We'll talk soon.